Okay, for this draft we're going to do the front torso sloper. So you're going to need a 22-inch by 34-inch piece of white pattern paper. And you're going to need your front bodice sloper. Okay, so take your front bodice sloper and trace it off and create a working pattern of it. Okay, so here's my working pattern of my front bodice sloper. We're just going to prep this real quick. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure down 2 inches from my armhole on side seam, and I'm going to mark it. And then I'm going to connect that mark to my apex, which is right here. Okay, this is going to be the placement line for a new dart we're going to put in a little bit. Okay, also down here in the corner, you see I've already have it written here, but I want you to put an X, like so. Okay, so this X is marking the intersection here of waist and side seam. Okay, so once you have that, go ahead and put it aside. And now on to our pattern paper. First thing we're going to do is we're going to, on the edge closest to us, we're going to mark a line the length of the pattern paper. And I'm doing about an inch, inch and a half off the edge of the paper. There we go. Now, on the left side, we're going to measure, and let's actually label this line first. We'll label this center front. Okay. On the left side now, on this line, let's measure up 3 inches from the side of the paper. Like so. And make a line, make a mark right there at center front. Okay. And we're going to label this mark A. Okay, now off of A, we're going to square a line. Okay, take your square ruler, line up the shorter end of it on center front, and the longer end bring right to the A mark. And again, we're going to square that right off. And this line is going to be about 10 inches. So I'm just drawing a line longer than I need. All right. I'll put that aside for a moment. Now what we're going to do is we're going to measure out from A on this new line, and we're going to measure 9 5/8. Okay, so again, from here we're going to measure out 9 5/8. Okay, so let's go ahead and measure out from A 9 5/8. Right there. And mark and label this B. Okay? This is now, we can label this the hem. Right. What we're doing right now is we're building a box that will create the lower part of our torso, the sloper. Okay, now we're going to measure up from A. We're going to measure up from A 8 inches. So go ahead and find A and measure up 8 inches and mark. Okay, we're going to label this mark D, and again this was 8 inches. Okay, so now we've measured out, we've measured up. Okay, we've started creating this box. A to B, this measurement here, 9 5/8, that's our front hip arc measurement. Okay, so our front hip arc is 9 1/8, plus we added a 1/2 inch ease. Okay, so it ended up being 9 5/8. Okay, this measurement A to D was our front hip depth measurement. Okay, and that was 8 inches. So now what we're going to do is we're going to square a line up from B. Okay, that line in the end we're going to measure up 8 inches on that line. So again, I'm going to square a line longer than I need it. So let's bring this in and square right off our hem line and up. And bring the edge right to B. There we are. and square that line up. There we go. Alright, now we're going to measure up this B line like we did here, okay? We're going to measure up 8 inches. So from B, measure up 8 inches and mark. And we're going to label this C, and now we can connect D point to C point. There we go. Alright, so let's check this box and make sure it's perfectly square. If it's not, we'll have issues. So, that should be 9 5/8. It is. It is. And then this should all be 8 inches. And it is. Okay, so that's good. Alright, one more mark we're going to make. Here at C, we're going to measure in 3/4 and mark. So measure in from C towards center front 3/4 of an inch. And mark it, like so. Okay, we're ready for our working pattern now. So let's grab our working pattern. Here's our working pattern. What we're going to do here is we're going to line up our center front of our working pattern with the center front line of our draft. And then here, our waistline, okay, is going to line up, of our working pattern is going to line up with the waistline of the draft. So let's just bring that in. Line up center front, center front. And just this corner part of the waistline is what I'm lining up with the waistline of the draft. I'm not trying to make all this line up, just here at the intersection of center front and waist. Okay, so center front looks good. Once you have it in place, go ahead and tape it down right at center front. There we go. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and slash up the dart leg closest to center front. Okay, so we're going to slash up this dart leg to the tip of the dart and then up to apex. We're not going to slash all the way through apex, just to it. And then we're going to come and slash through that placement line of where our new dart's going to go. So from side seam to apex. Okay, and again, we don't want to slash all the way through apex. We just want to make apex a hinge. Alright, so I'm going to slash up this dart leg closest to center front, and then up to apex. Alright, and then again here, my placement line for my new dart from side seam, slash in to apex, just enough so it doesn't break away, but it becomes a hinge. Alright, now that I've done that, I'm going to close this dart. So let's go ahead and close it. So I'm going to put it right underneath, okay? And what I'm going to do is, as I close it, you'll notice the side dart, the side bust dart will open. But what I want to do is bring X, so the intersection of side seam and waist of my working pattern, I want to bring that down so it touches the waist. So I'm going to keep closing this waist dart until this intersection touches the waist of the draft. There it is. Okay, exactly where I want it. Let's put a piece of tape there to hold it in place. Okay. Now let's trace off this draft. We're not going to trace off the whole thing. What I'm going to do is start here at intersection of center front neckline. Trace that off. Okay. And then come down my shoulder seam. Make sure you're marking all your notches. And I'm going to trace off my armhole. And then I'm going to trace down side seam. And when I get here to my dart opening, this first dart leg, I'm just going to mark about 1/4 inch in. Do not trace all the way down to apex. Just mark that first 1/4 inch. Come down to your next dart leg, open, do the same thing, only mark about 1/4 inch. And then trace down about another 1/2 inch, and that is it. Do not trace all the way down to the waist. Once you've done that, go ahead and mark your apex. So I'm just going to use my awl, mark it like so. And now I can take off my working pattern. Right here is my apex. Okay? Let's remove this. Alright. So let's start off by finding our dart. So you'll see we have the beginnings of one dart leg right here. And I'm just going to put a cross section right there. And one right here. Okay, so where these two lines intersect here and here, I'm going to put my ruler on those 2 points and find the center of it. Now your dart may be a little bigger or smaller than mine, that's fine. Just find your center and then mark it. So right there is my center. Okay, once you find the center of your dart, connect it right to apex. Like so. And now I'm going to just tee off my apex so we know where that is. Okay, let's label that apex. Now I'm going to measure 5/8 of an inch away from apex, right on this. This is our center fold line of our side dart here. So I'm going to measure it from apex on that line, that center fold line of the dart, 5/8 of an inch. And I'm going to mark that. Okay. Now I'm going to connect my dart legs to this point that's 5/8 of an inch away from apex. This is my dart tip. There. In here. Okay. Alright, so before we establish our side seam, let's go ahead and true our neckline, shoulder, and armhole. Remember, at intersection of neckline, our center front and neckline, we're going to square out about 1/4 of an inch. And now I'll use my curve ruler. Get the rest of that neckline in. Remember, every line needs to be trued, and you true it with a ruler. If a line is just traced, then it's not a real line until it's been trued by ruler. Okay, here's my shoulder seam. Remember to intersect all your lines. Notice I'm not just stopping at the corner, but I'm going past it. Alright, I'm going to do this intersection here. This is kind of a straight line. I'm just going to mark 1/4 inch down here, like that. Don't go any further. And now I'll use my, again, curve ruler, or if you have a French curve that fits well, you can use that as well. You just got to find the right curve that matches. There we go. Let's put in our notches. I have one at shoulder and one here in the armhole, directional notch. Okay, so now let's true this dart, or excuse me, let's fold out this dart and find our side seam. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my tracing wheel and go down the dart leg closest to the hem. Alright. When we fold out this dart, we want the seam allowance of the dart to fold down towards the hem. Okay. So I use my tracing wheel and I'm scoring the dart leg. I'm going to crease and then the center fold line because it will make it easier to fold this out. I'll also just score the dart tip. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold right at my dart tip. And because I have it crossed or teed there, it's easier to fold it. Should be. There we go. Okay. The reason I fold that under, or fold this under here, is because when I start creasing this, it will stop my fold right at that. Dart tip fold. Now I'm going to crease the dart leg closest to the hem. so. And then I'm going to bring it up to my other dart leg, closing that dart. And just close it like so. Okay, I'm going to take a piece of tape, and just so this doesn't open on me, I'm going to put it right here, holding that dart closed. Okay, so now let's go ahead and draw on our new side seam. Okay, that mark that we marked in 3/4 of an inch away from C, right there, that's where it's going to connect to. And it's going to come right from this intersection, armhole and side seam, the original side seam. So I'm going to draw this in red right now because I am going to change it a little bit, probably, in a few minutes. But first, there we go. Alright, so I know I just said I'm going to change it, but what I'm going to change will be down here, so we don't have to worry about what we're about to do right now. And what I'm going to do now is figure out what my dart intake looks like. So, let's get that out. And you can probably see through the paper the dart seam allowance, the shadow of it, okay? This new side seam, this red line that I drew, I'm going to trace over that side seam line right where my dart seam allowance is folded under. So let's trace under, get all that seam allowance of the dart, like so, using your tracing wheel. Now we can open this back up. Flatten this out. And there we go. You can see the perforations of my tracing wheel. So let me just put those in now, and then we can see exactly what this dart opening looks like. There. And there. Okay? Alright, so now let's continue on this draft. Now I'm going to get my hip curve. Alright, to do this, I'm going to first measure up from my hem 2 inches on the side seam. So, I'm going to measure up 2 inches from hem and mark. There we go. Now with my curved ruler, turn this around. I'm going to take my curved ruler, and with the large side of the curve facing up, I'm going to place 11 at that 2-inch mark. Okay? So let's place 11 right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push out, keeping 11 right at that mark at side seam. I'm going to push this out until my curved ruler touches that 3/4 inch mark that we made, that's 3/4 inches away from C. And there. Okay? So right there and there. That gives me my hip curve. And I'm going to draw this in red now too, because I don't want to make it permanent yet. Okay. So now you can see I've created my side seam. Alright, I have my hip curve and then side seam. Now, right here, this is a very pointy waist, which is not wrong. You could keep it like that. But I want to put a little bit of a curve on that. Kind of blend it a little better. So I'm going to take my curve ruler, and I'm going to place 1 right on my waistline, and then I'm just going to move this in until it touches my side seam right there. And now that kind of softens that curve a little bit right there. Okay? Now I'll go ahead and mark these with my black to show that it's permanent. So again, I'm going to put 11 right at that mark, and I'm going to blend right into that curve. There. Okay. And up here is all straight, so I can just use my clear plastic ruler. And don't get it mixed up with this original side seam. It's smaller now, or it's inside more. So, we'll mark this. And here as well. And here. Okay. So now we have the majority of the torso done, the front torso. All we have left to do is put in our waist darts, our closed-ended waist darts. So let's establish 2 guidelines to help us get our waist darts on in position. So what I'm going to do here is my apex, right here at this intersection. Let me do that. That's apex. And I'll circle it. Okay. So we're going to measure down 1 inch from apex. Okay, so I'm going to square off my center front. And this ruler is 2 inches, so if I put that center line right on apex while I'm squaring off my center front, that is 1 inch down from apex. And I'm just going to use my red just to show this is not permanent here, and make a mark. Okay, so that's one guideline. Now we're going to square, here's our waistline, we're going to mark 3 inches off our waistline. So I'm just going to mark 3 inches here, mark it, and then another 3 inches right here, and mark it. Okay, and then I'm going to square off center front and connect those 2 marks. Okay, so let's establish the first fold line of our first dart. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come right off of apex, so I'm squaring off my 2 guidelines, or my waistline even. And I'm going to draw a line, and so I'm squaring off waist, and I'm pushing my ruler towards the side seam until it touches my apex. Okay, now, not from apex, but just below it, I'll start drawing a line right above the guideline, and then stop right after the other guideline. I just want those lines to be intersect. That's the first center fold, or this first fold line of my first waistline dart. And now I'm going to measure off of that 1 3/4 inches. So right there, that fold line, I'm measuring 1 3/4 inches from there. And I'm going to draw another line, just like that. So intersect with the 2 guidelines, don't go too far past them, like so. Alright, these are my center fold lines of my 2 waistline darts. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 1/4 inch away from each of these fold lines of these darts in both directions. So 1/4 inch that direction, and 1/4 inch towards center front, and then the same thing on this one. 1/4 inch towards side seam, and 1/4 inch towards center front. Okay, this is the largest part of the intake. It's right along the waist where you nip in the most. I'm going to tee off at each of my dart tips. Black. And now I'm going to connect these intake points to the tips of my dart. Alright, so there's one dart, and let's do our second one. Same thing. Connecting the marks at waistline to the dart tips. And here as well. There we go. We've now created our waistline darts. Okay, so let's add a little bit of information to this. I'm just going to draw some guidelines here for that. There we go. So we're going to label this our front torso. And sloper. Put the size, so this is a size 10. Put your name and the date. Okay. All right, you have now successfully drafted this the front torso. Okay, don't cut this out because we're going to transfer it to oak tag, and we don't want to have cut out to do that. And you always want to have this in case you lose your oak tag sloper. So there it is, front torso, your front torso sloper complete.